I never thought a single phone call would blow apart the life I'd spent 64 years building. One moment, I was a proud father who believed all the sacrifices I'd made would be honored. If not now, then eventually. The next, everything I thought I knew was shattered by a son who called me a burden, and insisted I had no place in his world anymore. That night, as I packed a small suitcase and left my own home in silence, I realized how decades of quiet compromise can twist into heartbreak. And yet, heartbreak was only the beginning of my story. I was 23 when I married Lily, my college sweetheart. Neither of us had much money. She was studying to be a teacher, and I was trying to find steady work after an injury cost me my dream of joining the police force. We lived in a cramped studio apartment, barely scraping by. But we had that unstoppable optimism of youth. We believed we'd eventually earn enough to buy a home, start a family, and carve out a modest, comfortable future. Our first and only child, Jordan, was born 2 years into our marriage. I still remember holding him for the first time, feeling a rush of love so fierce it almost hurt. Lily and I promised we'd give him the life we never had. Stable, supportive, full of opportunities. Every bottle I prepared at midnight, every diaper I changed at dawn, it felt like an investment in his future. Lily's health took a turn for the worse not long after Jordan turned 5. She was diagnosed with a degenerative neurological condition that slowly drained her energy and motor function. The medical bills mounted fast, forcing me to juggle 2 jobs, mornings at a warehouse, evenings as a security guard, just to keep up with insurance copays. While Jordan was still a small boy, Lily tried to remain a hands-on mother, but the disease sapped her strength. By the time Jordan was 8, she was mostly confined to bed, and I was all but drowning in guilt, exhaustion, and grief. But no matter how tired I was, no matter how bleak things looked, Jordan stayed my shining light. He was bright, curious, always reading ahead of his grade level. I fought for him to get into better schools, took on weekend shifts so he could have a tutor or attend a special science camp. I told myself, if he thrives, Lily's sacrifice, my sacrifice, won't be in vain. When Jordan was 10, Lily passed away quietly in her sleep. Her last words to me were, "Don't give up on him, please." I promised, tears soaking my face, that I wouldn't. And for a while I kept that promise with everything I had. I funneled all my grief into ensuring Jordan never missed a field trip or after-school program. My own happiness, my own health, took a backseat, but I didn't care. He was my boy, my hope for a better tomorrow. And Jordan did well. By high school he was racking up awards, glowing teacher recommendations, and a serious shot at top-tier universities. I daydreamed about the day I'd watch him cross a stage to accept a degree. We'd hug, and he'd see how my sacrifices got him there. Maybe he'd become a doctor, an engineer, something secure and fulfilling. I pictured him returning my love tenfold, helping me in my old age if I needed it, or just treating me with the respect I hoped I'd earned. In my imagination, we were an unbreakable father-son duo, bound by trials we overcame after Lily's death. But life rarely goes the way we script it. Jordan went off to a prestigious university on partial scholarship. Even so, it was pricey: housing, textbooks, lab fees. I sold my old truck, took out a second mortgage on the small condo Lily and I had scraped together to buy. I worked security at night, dozing in my car for catnaps, living on instant ramen. Sometimes Jordan texted at 2 in the morning. "Hey Dad, I need $500 for a project," or "I'm short on rent this month." I never said no. Occasionally I'd lecture him about budgeting, but I'd always cave. He was my son after all. Lily's final wish echoed in my mind each time I withdrew the last of my paycheck. Take care of him. He graduated with high honors and launched a career in finance. I was so proud I nearly burst. I wanted to be at his graduation, but he told me it was limited seating, that I'd only be able to see from overflow seating in a side hall. He said it so off-handedly, I tried not to let it sting. Instead, I consoled myself by imagining the bigger celebrations we'd share once he got established. He'll invite me over to see his new office, I told myself. He'll introduce me to colleagues as the father who made it all possible. But the phone calls became infrequent. He got busier. I turned 60 and he missed my modest celebration, sending a text. "Happy birthday, Dad. Sorry I can't be there. I'll make it up to you soon." He never did. Instead, I discovered from social media that he was engaged to a woman named Valerie, the daughter of a wealthy businessman. They posted pictures of glamorous vacations, lavish dinners, a life so removed from the gritty reality I inhabited that it almost felt like we were no longer related. When they announced their wedding, Jordan asked me to keep it small on my end because Valerie's father was hosting many VIPs, and space was tight. I tried not to take it personally. But on the wedding day, I found myself tucked into a corner table, overshadowed by business elites. They posted photos on social media with captions about family, but I was absent in most shots. Valerie's father gave a long toast praising Jordan's incredible journey, barely acknowledging me beyond a perfunctory nod. I swallowed tears, telling myself, this is his big day. Don't ruin it. The sense that I'd lost my boy to a world of polished illusions threatened to break me, but I smiled, toasted quietly, and left early. After the wedding, Jordan's calls dwindled further. I'd see pictures of them traveling, Valerie in designer clothes, Jordan beaming next to her. Meanwhile, I was forced to sell the condo at a terrible loss because the second mortgage weighed me down. I ended up renting a small, run-down apartment, my back and knees protesting every step from the years of manual labor. I sometimes told myself, it's worth it. He's thriving. The first time Jordan told me I was a burden, I thought I must have misheard. I'd called to see if I could visit him for a few days, since I had health issues and needed some help recovering from minor surgery. I'd hoped maybe I could stay in their guest room for a short time. "Dad, that's not really an option," he said brusquely. "Valerie's folks come around a lot. They can be particular. I can't just have you lazing around. No offense, but financially you're kind of a burden. We're trying to keep up appearances." My stomach twisted with betrayal. Burden. I'd poured everything into him, gone hungry, sweated through double shifts. Now that he had wealth and status, I was an embarrassment. I bit back tears, reminded him gently. "Son, I'm only asking for a little help. Just a place to rest until I heal." He sighed, exasperated. "Dad, we're under a lot of pressure. This isn't a charity. You should have planned better for retirement. I can't fix your mistakes." That phone call replayed in my mind for days. I felt a flood of conflicting emotions. Heartbreak, rage, guilt. Maybe I had failed to set boundaries, let him take me for granted. But wasn't that what parents do? Give unconditionally. Sorrow gave way to a simmering anger. After all I'd done, how dare he treat me like worthless baggage? Weeks turned into months. My health improved slightly, but my finances worsened. I considered going back to part-time security jobs, but my knees couldn't handle the standing. Meanwhile, I saw glimpses of Jordan's lavish life on social media. Fancy home upgrades, an expensive new car. He never reached out. The gap between us stretched wide. An open wound I tried to bandage with small illusions. Then, as fate would have it, I received a letter from an old friend of Lily's, who'd become a nurse in a better-paying hospital system. She wrote that she'd always respected how I cared for Lily and single-handedly raised Jordan. She needed a caretaker for her ailing mother in exchange for free lodging in a more comfortable area. She asked if I was interested. Grateful for the possibility, I agreed. A caretaker role might be easier on my body than warehouse shifts. So I packed my few belongings, left my bleak apartment, and moved into her mother's home, a small but cozy place in a nicer part of town. Life found a new rhythm. I cooked, cleaned, and helped the elderly lady with medications and gentle exercises. She was kind, reminiscent of a mother figure I never really had, praising me for my patience. In quiet moments I replayed Jordan's words. "You should have planned better, Dad. I can't fix your mistakes." A bitterness gnawed at me. I'd done nothing but plan for him, never for myself. Now he called that a mistake. One afternoon, while rummaging through old boxes in the caretaker's home, I stumbled upon letters Lily had written decades ago to her friend, praising me. "He gives everything to Jordan. Sometimes I fear he'll lose himself." Tears blurred my vision. Lily had seen it even back then. She'd worried I'd vanish into fatherhood, leaving no piece of me for me. She was right, and I was reaping that consequence now. I quietly thanked Lily's memory for her foresight, promising I'd at least reclaim my dignity if nothing else. 6 months into my caretaker role, I heard rumors that Jordan and Valerie were about to have their first child. I discovered the news indirectly. Someone who knew them saw it on social media. So they were expecting a baby, and I was the last to know. My heart twinged. I remembered how I'd daydreamed about being a grandparent, doting on the child, sharing the joys I never quite had time for with Jordan. But evidently, they didn't see me as worthy of that role. Another wave of sorrow crashed over me. Still, I forced myself to reach out. "Congratulations on the baby news, son," I texted. "I wish you both the best. If you ever need help, let me know." He replied a day later, "Thanks. We have it handled." No mention of a baby shower, no invitation. I told myself I was done trying. If they wanted me out of their life, so be it. But the heartbreak never fully receded. Life rolled on. I settled into the caretaker's routine, found modest contentment in daily chores, evening TV with a kindly old woman. I was grateful for a peaceful environment away from the hustle I'd known. Then, like lightning from a clear sky, Jordan called me unexpectedly one weekend. His tone urgent. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you come to my house tomorrow?" My stomach flipped. He'd never invited me before. Did something happen? Was Valerie ill, or had their finances collapsed? I arrived the next day, noticing how their large suburban home was even more opulent than I'd remembered. Marble floors, a chandelier in the foyer. Jordan greeted me stiffly. We sat in the living room, a space so pristine it felt unlived in. Valerie appeared, her pregnant belly obvious under a designer dress. She offered a curt hello and disappeared upstairs, claiming she needed rest. Jordan cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Dad, you know we're having a baby soon." I nodded, heart pounding. He pressed his palms together. We need help. Financial help." My breath caught. Again. He explained how his firm was laying off employees. He was on the short list. Valerie's father had withdrawn some promised support due to business losses. The mortgage ballooned after an adjustable rate hike. "We might lose the house," Jordan murmured. "And with the baby on the way, we're desperate." My mind reeled. "Why come to me? I'm the one you called a burden. You think I have some secret stash of money?" He winced, nodding begrudgingly. "I heard you're living somewhere stable. You must have some arrangement. Maybe you have savings you never told me about." "Dad, this is crucial. If we don't get an influx of cash, I'll lose the house, and Valerie might. She can't handle stress in her condition." I stared in disbelief. My meager caretaker's position gave me a roof, not wealth. Did he think I was some hidden millionaire? My voice shook with controlled anger. "Jordan, do you realize how absurd this is? You throw me out of your life, but the moment you're in trouble, you come expecting me to fix everything." He looked down, guilt flooding his features. I'm sorry about before. We were under pressure. I know I said some awful things." My heart battered against my ribs, torn between paternal instinct and self-preservation. "If I had the funds, would you even treat me differently, or just repay me with more scorn once you're back on your feet?" He reached for my hand, an uncharacteristic gesture of vulnerability. "Dad, we have no one else to turn to. I get that I messed up badly. But I can't let my baby be born homeless." Emotions warred inside me. The father in me wanted to rescue him, if only for the sake of that unborn grandchild. Yet the wounded man in me wanted an apology that ran deeper than desperation. "You realize how you humiliated me. You've never truly apologized for calling me worthless," I said softly. Tears glinted in his eyes. I know. I said those things out of arrogance, trying to impress Valerie's circle. I didn't want them seeing you, someone with less money. I was ashamed. And now I see I was a fool. I gazed at him, seeing a flicker of the child who once needed my guidance. All right, I said at length. I'll help if I can. But we need to talk details. And you have to treat me with basic respect from here on out. If I help you keep your house, I won't be locked out of it like last time. Understood? He nodded, voice quivering. Yes, Dad. Whatever it takes. I sighed, anxiety churning. I had no nest egg. My caretaker job barely covered expenses. But maybe I could approach the kindly old woman's daughter for a small loan, or talk to the community center about a fundraiser. The lengths I'd considered to ensure my grandchild wasn't born into chaos unsettled me. Yet I told myself Lily would have wanted me to do this. Over the next few weeks, I tried every avenue, hitting one dead end after another. People gave sympathetic frowns, but no one had thousands to spare for a father's ungrateful son. At night, I'd collapse in bed, exhausted, wondering if I was a fool. Meanwhile, Jordan grew antsy, pushing me daily. Dad, have you found a solution? Tension soared. Then one day, ironically, fortune struck in the unlikeliest manner. The elderly mother I was caring for passed away peacefully, leaving behind a surprise in her will, a small inheritance for me, in gratitude for my kindness. It wasn't life-changing, but it might just be enough to cover Jordan's shortfall and keep the bank from foreclosing on his home. My hands shook reading the lawyer's letter. Should I bail him out, or let him face consequences? I decided to help one last time, mostly for the unborn child's sake. But first, I met Jordan in a coffee shop, laying out conditions in writing. I'll give you X amount, and in return, you promise that I'll never again be cast aside. That if I choose to visit your home, I'm welcome. And if someday I need a place to stay, for medical reasons or old age, you won't deny me. He swallowed, tears forming. I promise, Dad. I promise. I sensed a new humility in him, born of desperation. But maybe, just maybe, it could lead to real change. We sealed the agreement. I wrote the check, heart pounding. Jordan expressed massive relief, hugging me tight for the first time in years. I tried to quash the lingering fear that once stable, he'd revert to arrogance. Only time would tell. He used the funds to stave off foreclosure, quieting the immediate crisis. Valerie, heavily pregnant, offered me a cautious thanks. Her pride stung at needing my help. I visited them occasionally, noticing the shift in their attitude. Mark's parents were no longer around, or maybe they'd distanced themselves. The tension was thick, but they tried being civil. When the baby arrived, a girl named Lily after my late wife, my heart melted. I held that tiny infant in my arms, tears streaming. For a moment, all bitterness vanished. This child knew nothing of the betrayals or humiliations. She only needed love. I told Jordan softly, "Don't break her heart the way you broke mine." He nodded with a remorseful smile. Time crawled forward. Jordan settled into a more modest job, paying bills steadily. We had cautious dinners together. Sometimes I saw glimpses of the father-son relationship I'd once dreamed about. But we still tiptoed around old wounds. One evening, I overheard him reassuring Valerie that Dad's not a burden. He saved our home. I allowed myself a small, relieved smile. Perhaps redemption was possible. Then came the final test. Mark's parents re-entered the picture, hearing about my involvement. They tried inviting me to a dinner, presumably to thank me for helping Jordan. But I declined, not wanting to endure their shallow condescension. I told Jordan I wasn't ready for that. He understood. A year prior, he'd have demanded I comply to keep the social wheels turning. Now he simply nodded. It's your choice, Dad. I turned 65 quietly, no party. Just a modest cake with Jordan's new family. The baby, Lily, crawled around my feet, gurgling happily. Valerie and I exchanged cordial smiles. Perhaps she resented me less now that I'd proven useful. Or maybe motherhood softened her, letting her see me as more than just an outdated man overshadowing her grand illusions. During dessert, Jordan clinked his glass, clearing his throat. "Dad, there's something I want to say." I braced myself. "I owe you a real apology, far beyond the quick words I gave before. I've been thinking how you sacrificed everything for me, and I turned around and called you worthless." Tears gathered in his eyes. "I'm so sorry for every time I made you feel small. And I want you to know, if you ever need anything, help with living arrangements, medical care, or just daily errands, my door is always open." My throat felt thick. I blinked back tears. "Thank you, son," I whispered. "I hope we can keep building from here." In that moment, Lily tugged at my pant leg, giggling. I scooped her up, smiling through a blur of emotion. This right here was the fragile yet precious second chance I'd never believed I'd see. My mind drifted to Lily, my late wife, wishing she could see her granddaughter, see Jordan's contrition, see how life had battered us but not destroyed us. As time went on, I found my caretaker role replaced by a simpler part-time job at a library, a quiet environment suiting my aging bones. Jordan's visits grew more frequent. Sometimes he came alone, sometimes with baby Lily. Valerie, while polite, remained somewhat distant. But I no longer craved her acceptance. The real transformation was between me and my son. He'd share stories about daily work frustrations, asking for advice. I'd give thoughtful suggestions, and he'd actually listen, a far cry from the dismissive tone of old. One day, I mentioned I'd always yearned to travel, maybe see a national park or two, but I'd never had the time or money. Jordan looked thoughtful. A week later, he proposed we take a short road trip, father and son, while Valerie stayed with the baby at home. "No big spectacle, just us," he said. My heart soared. So we drove for hours, singing along to old tunes from my youth. We camped under the stars, building a small fire, and he asked me about my memories of Lily, my wife, and how we'd fallen in love. I recounted silly college stories, how I'd left her sweet notes in her chemistry textbook. We laughed until tears rolled down our cheeks. At some point, the laughter ebbed, replaced by a quiet closeness we'd never had the chance to forge before. By dawn, I felt lighter than I had in years. Back home, I told baby Lily stories about her namesake grandmother. Jordan listened intently, not rolling his eyes or cutting me off. The tension from the old days, the humiliations, receded like a distant nightmare. Course scars remain. I still sometimes look at Jordan and recall how he once spat venom at me. He still occasionally has moments of stress, where I see a flash of arrogance or impatience. But overall, we've built a foundation of mutual respect that neither of us had known was possible. Looking at where we are now, I realize our story might serve as a testament to how heartbreak and betrayal need not be the end. Pride can ruin families, but so can pure bitterness. Sometimes it takes both sides to break the cycle, one stepping down from pride, the other refusing to remain a victim. We both changed. He discovered humility. I discovered boundaries. And in that compromise we found each other again. If you've listened to my story until now, know that second chances come in the strangest of guises. Mine arrived wrapped in tears, accusations, and near despair. But we emerged with a genuine father-son bond that overcame illusions of status and wealth. For those out there who feel betrayed by a child or feel you've lost the love that once defined your life, it can still be rediscovered if both hearts are willing. I'm 66 as I speak these final words, living quietly, contentedly. I read bedtime stories to my granddaughter, watch her eyes sparkle with wonder. I helped Jordan fix a leaky faucet in his simpler, more modest home they bought after selling the old mortgage-laden place. We share Sunday lunches. We talk about Lily, about the future, about the fragile gift of family. Nothing is perfect. We bicker sometimes. Memories of old wounds flare up. But we address them because we learned the danger of letting resentment fester. Above all, I've learned that you can't buy a child's devotion with endless sacrifice, nor can you demand love from someone who's grown distant in the chase for success. But if that child recognizes their mistakes, if they come around, and if your heart can stand opening up once more, maybe, just maybe, a better relationship can bloom from the wreckage. And that's how my story ends. Not with a triumphant victory or a savage revenge, but with quiet relief that we didn't lose each other forever. Even in the darkest days of heartbreak, love can still find a way back if we let it. Thank you for staying with me through this long, winding tale. I hope it encourages you not to give up on those you love, even if they hurt you deeply. Draw your lines, guard your dignity, but keep a small ember of hope burning. Because sometimes, against all odds, people do come back, and second chances can be far sweeter than we ever expect.